My life in the USA. My name is Samir. I'm 23 and 2 years ago, I made the biggest decision of my life. I moved to the United States. It feels like it was just yesterday, but in reality, it's been a roller coaster of emotions, surprises, and moments I never thought I'd experience. Coming from a middle-class family in India, I always had dreams of going abroad, seeing the world, and making something of myself. I had a good job back home, but the USA was calling. It wasn't just the idea of a better salary or living in a foreign country. It was the idea of possibility. That's what America represented to me. When I first stepped off the plane in San Francisco, I couldn't believe I was actually here. The airport was huge, busy, and filled with people from all over the world. I remember looking around, feeling a mixture of excitement and nervousness. I had no idea what lay ahead of me, but one thing was clear. I had a lot to learn. The first shock came when I tried to order a coffee. Back home, a cup of tea or coffee is simple. You go to the counter, ask for chai, and that's it. But here, when I walked into a Starbucks, I was overwhelmed by the choices. Tall grande veni, the barista asked. I stood there, confused. Just coffee, I said awkwardly, and the people in line behind me started getting impatient. The barista gave me a polite smile, but I could tell she was waiting for me to make a proper decision. After a few more questions and some awkward guessing, I finally walked away with a plain black coffee. It wasn't what I expected, and it tasted bitter, but it was my first taste of America. That was just the beginning of my small confusions. Back home, we drive on the left side of the road, but in the U.S., it's the right side. I remember the first time I sat behind the wheel of a car here. My palms were sweating, and my heart was racing. I was so focused on staying on the right side that I missed a stop sign and nearly caused an accident. The guy in the other car honked loudly, throwing his hands up in the air like I'd just committed a crime. I waved apologetically, but he sped off without acknowledging me. Welcome to driving in America. I had rented a small apartment just outside the city. It wasn't much, barely enough space for me and my suitcase. I remember looking around that first night, thinking, is this really it? Is this what I left home for? The apartment felt cold and empty, nothing like the warm, bustling home I had back in India. Back home, there was always someone around, my parents, my sister, even neighbors who would just drop by for a chat. Here, it was silent. I could hear the hum of the fridge and the occasional car driving by. But that was it. For the first time in my life, I was truly alone. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of trying to figure out how to live here. Everything seemed so expensive. I was used to bargaining at markets back home. But here, prices were fixed, and they were high. I remember walking into a grocery store and staring in disbelief at the price tags. A loaf of bread cost nearly $5. In India, that same amount of money could buy you enough food for a whole day. I quickly learned that if I wanted to survive here, I had to budget carefully. My salary was decent, $60,000 a year, but after rent, utilities, and food, there wasn't much left for anything else. I had to share my apartment with a roommate to cut costs, but even that didn't leave much breathing room. Eating out was a luxury. A simple meal at a restaurant could easily cost $20 to $30. And don't even get me started on the tipping culture. In India, you leave a small tip if you're really happy with the service, but here, tipping is expected, and it's usually 15 to 20%. The first time I went out to eat, I didn't leave a tip because I didn't know, and the waiter gave me a look I'll never forget. I felt terrible once I realized my mistake, but it was a learning experience. Speaking of learning, my English was tested in ways I didn't expect. I had always been confident in my English skills. After all, we spoke English in school, and I thought I had a good handle on it. But American English? That was something else. People here speak fast, really fast. And they use slang that I'd never heard before. What's up? Someone asked me in the office on my first day. I blinked, confused. Was he asking about work? Did he want to know if something was wrong? I just smiled and nodded, which became my go-to response when I didn't understand something. Over time, I started picking up on the little things, like how Americans love small talk. Back home, if you see someone in the elevator, you don't strike up a conversation. But here, people ask, "How's your day going?" Or, "Nice weather today, huh?" It's casual, friendly, but also strange at first. I wasn't used to talking to strangers, but it became a part of my daily routine. And then there was a loneliness. I didn't expect it to hit me so hard, but it did. In India, family is everything. We're close, always together, always supporting each other. But here, I was on my own. I'd come home from work to an empty apartment. No mom waiting with a warm meal. No dad asking about my day. Just me and the four walls. I'd call home, of course, but it wasn't the same. My parents were proud of me, but I could hear the concern in their voices. They'd always ask, "Are you eating well? Are you okay?" And I'd say yes, but deep down, I wasn't sure. There were days when I questioned my decision. Was this really what I wanted? To be thousands of miles away from home, struggling to make ends meet, learning a new culture and trying to fit in? It wasn't easy. But every time I thought about giving up, I reminded myself of why I came here in the first place. I came for a better life, for opportunities, for a chance to prove myself. Things started to change when I made my first friend, Josh. He worked in the same office as me, and one day he invited me to lunch. I was hesitant at first. Back home, you don't just go out with people you barely know. But I went, and it turned out to be one of the best decisions I made. Josh introduced me to other people, helped me understand the American way of life, and even taught me some slang. He made me feel less like an outsider and more like I belonged. As time went on, I started to find my rhythm. I learned how to navigate the city, how to budget my money, and how to cook my own meals. I even started to enjoy the little things, like walking through the park or grabbing a coffee on a lazy Sunday morning. There were still tough days, of course, days when I missed home so much it hurt. But slowly, I was building a new life here. One of the most surprising things I learned about Americans is how much they love their dogs. Everywhere I went, people were walking their dogs, playing with them in parks, and even bringing them to cafes. It seemed like there were more dogs than kids. I didn't understand it at first, but after seeing how much joy these pets brought to their owners, I started to get it. Dogs here are like family. People treat them with so much care and affection. It was heartwarming, and it made me think about getting a dog myself one day. As time passed, life in the U.S. began to feel a little more familiar. I'd settled into my job, and Josh had become a good friend. But amidst the busy work days and adjusting to life here, something unexpected happened. I met her. Her name was Amanda. She worked in a different department at my office, and we met during a team-building event. At first, it was just friendly smiles in the hallway, casual small talk about work. But soon, things became more than that. Amanda was everything I admired: smart, funny, and full of energy. She had a way of making every situation feel lighter, and before I knew it, I found myself thinking about her all the time. We started going out for coffee after work, and those small moments with her became the highlights of my day. She was the first person in the U.S. who made me feel completely comfortable, like I didn't have to try so hard to fit in. With her, I could just be Samir. One weekend, she invited me to her family's home for a barbecue. Now, if there's one thing Americans love almost as much as their dogs, it's a good barbecue. I had no idea what to expect, but I quickly learned that these gatherings are serious business. Her dad had this huge grill in the backyard, flipping burgers and ribs like a pro. I tried to help, but when I burned a few hot dogs, Amanda's dad gently guided me away from the grill, laughing. "Why don't you leave the cooking to us and enjoy the sunshine, Samir?" That day was full of laughter, and I felt a sense of belonging I hadn't felt since leaving home. Amanda and I started seeing each other more often after that. It was my first real relationship in the U.S., and things were going great until they weren't. You see, Amanda and I came from different worlds. I was still adjusting to life in America, trying to balance my roots with the new culture around me. Amanda, on the other hand, had grown up here. She didn't fully understand the weight of my family's expectations or the guilt I sometimes felt for leaving them behind. We had small disagreements at first, things like how often I called my parents or why I couldn't just fly back to India for a visit whenever I wanted. But over time, those small arguments grew into something bigger. One night, after a long week at work, we sat in my apartment, and out of nowhere she said, "Samir, do you ever feel like we're too different?" Her words hit me like a punch. I didn't see it coming. I thought we were doing fine, but Amanda felt like she couldn't connect with parts of my life, especially the part that still held on to home. We tried to work through it, but it became clear that no matter how much we cared for each other, we were heading in different directions. The breakup was hard. There were nights when I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I had made a mistake coming here. I missed her. I missed how she made me laugh. The way she could turn a stressful day into something manageable. I even missed the little things, like how she'd always steal fries off my plate when we went out to eat. For a long time, I couldn't stop thinking about her. I'd replay our last conversation over and over, asking myself if there was something I could have said or done differently. But as much as I missed her, I knew that some things just weren't meant to be. Life had a way of teaching me that. Sometimes we have to let go of people, not because we don't love them, but because staying together would hold us back from becoming who we're meant to be. So I focused on healing. Josh, being the good friend he was, would drag me out of my apartment when he could see I was stuck in my head. "You need to live a little, man," he'd say, practically pushing me out the door to grab a beer or watch a game at the bar. I didn't drink much, but it was good to be around people, to laugh at stupid jokes and forget my worries for a while. One night, after a couple of drinks, Josh and I were walking home when he started imitating my Indian accent in a ridiculous way. "Oh, Samir, please tell me how to make the best curry," he said, in a voice that was so exaggerated I couldn't help but burst out laughing. I laughed so hard, I nearly tripped over the sidewalk. It felt good to laugh again, to let go of some of the heaviness I'd been carrying. Funny moments like that became my saving grace. Like the time I tried to make an Indian dish called samosas for Josh and our friends. I thought it would be nice to introduce them to some of my culture, but halfway through, I realized I'd added way too much chili powder. When Josh took his first bite, his eyes bulged and his face turned red. "Dude, are you trying to kill me?" he gasped, chugging water. Everyone burst out laughing, and even though my cooking was a disaster, that night became one of my favorite memories. On the work front, things were steady. I was getting better at handling my responsibilities, and my confidence in my English was improving. But every now and then, I'd still get thrown off by some American phrases. Once, during a meeting, my boss said, "Let's circle back to that later." I nodded, but I had no idea what circle back meant. Later, I found out it just meant to return to the topic. It's funny how the smallest phrases can make you feel like an outsider. But over time, I learned to laugh at these moments rather than feel embarrassed. Mistakes are just part of learning. After all, traveling around the U.S. was another adventure. One weekend, I decided to take a solo trip to New York City. Everyone always talks about how it's the city that never sleeps, and they weren't lying. The moment I stepped out of the subway in Times Square, I was hit with a wave of noise, lights, and people. It was overwhelming and exciting all at once. I spent hours just walking around, marveling at the tall buildings and the energy of the city. I tried New York pizza for the first time. It was huge, greasy, and delicious. I even met a street performer who was playing the saxophone, and when he noticed me watching, he winked and started playing the tune of an old Bollywood song. It was such a random, unexpected moment, and I couldn't stop smiling. But beyond the excitement of new experiences, there were life lessons that hit hard. One thing I learned quickly was how to manage money. Living in the U.S. isn't cheap, and there were times when I had to get creative with my budget. I remember once, during a particularly tight month, I survived on ramen noodles and peanut butter sandwiches for an entire week. It was tough, but it taught me the importance of planning and saving. And then there were the lessons about people. In America, I learned that not everyone who smiles at you is your friend. People are polite, yes. They say hi even if they don't know you, and sometimes they give compliments just to be nice. But that doesn't always mean they have your best interests at heart. I had to learn to trust my gut, to recognize the difference between genuine kindness and surface-level politeness. There were people who supported me wholeheartedly, like Josh, but there were also people who didn't care if I succeeded or failed. Through it all, though, I realized the importance of family. No matter how far I was from home, my parents were always there for me. Their phone calls, their words of encouragement, and even their gentle scolding kept me grounded. They reminded me of who I was and where I came from. On tough days, I'd think about all the sacrifices they made so I could have a better life. That thought alone gave me the strength to keep pushing forward, even when things got tough. After the breakup, life slowed down a little, but not in a bad way. I had more time to focus on myself, my work, and most importantly, my English. You'd think after living in the US for a while, I'd have it all figured out. But no, English is like a tricky puzzle, always throwing new challenges my way. One day I'd feel like I had it under control, and the next, I'd find myself completely lost in a conversation. Take, for example, this one time at work. It was a typical morning, and I was sipping my coffee when my boss walked up and said, "Samir, could you give me a ballpark figure on the project costs?" I stared at him blankly. Ballpark figure? Were we suddenly talking about baseball? I tried to keep a straight face and nodded, pretending I understood. But inside, I was panicking. I Googled ballpark figure under the table during the meeting and found out it just meant an estimate. Phew, close call. I laughed about it later. But these little moments kept me on my toes. But it wasn't all confusion. There were plenty of fun and quirky things I loved about living here. For one, Americans love their holidays. Every month, it felt like there was some new excuse to celebrate. Halloween, Thanksgiving, Christmas. It was non-stop. Halloween was the most bizarre one for me. Back in India, I'd seen it in movies, but nothing prepared me for the reality of grown adults dressing up in costumes and roaming the streets. Josh and I decided to throw a little Halloween party at our apartment, and he convinced me to dress up as Spider-Man. Let's just say, wearing that tight suit was an experience. Halfway through the party, the mask became so unbearable, I ripped it off, much to the amusement of my friends. Josh, on the other hand, dressed as a giant hot dog and spent the entire evening telling people to relish the moment. It was so bad it was funny. Funny moments like that became a part of my everyday life. Once, I went to a drive-thru for the first time. I had seen them in movies but never experienced it myself. I was so nervous about getting the order right that when the lady asked, "Do you want fries with that?" I panicked and said, "No, I'll just take the ketchup." The lady at the window gave me the most confused look, and I drove away with only ketchup packets and no fries. I laughed about it all the way home, realizing how ridiculous I must have sounded. Speaking of food, American meals were something else. Breakfast here was a big deal. In India, my breakfast usually consisted of something light, like parathas or idli. But here, people started their day with pancakes, eggs, bacon, and a mountain of syrup. I tried it once, but by the time I finished, I felt like I needed to go back to bed instead of starting my day. I did, however, fall in love with their sandwiches. A turkey sandwich for lunch became my go-to, but I had to be careful. The portions here were massive. I couldn't believe how much food they served, and sometimes I'd end up with leftovers for dinner. Life in the U.S. wasn't just about funny moments and food, though. It taught me some hard lessons, too. One of the most unexpected things I learned was how lonely it could feel, even in a country full of people. You'd think that with all the friendliness, people saying hi on the street, neighbors waving, colleagues asking how your weekend was, I'd never feel alone. But sometimes, the polite greetings didn't go beyond that. They were just that, greetings. It wasn't the deep connection I craved. There were nights when I'd come back to my apartment, sit on the couch, and feel this wave of homesickness hit me. I'd miss my family, my friends, even the chaos of India. I'd call my parents sometimes just to hear their voices, and it would help. But other times, I just had to sit with that feeling and remind myself that this was all part of the journey. One thing that helped pull me out of those lonely moments was a dog. Not my dog, unfortunately, but Josh's dog. A golden retriever named Max. Max was this big, fluffy ball of joy who'd run around our apartment like he owned the place. Josh traveled a lot for work, and whenever he was away, Max stayed with me. I never thought of myself as a dog person, but Max had a way of lifting my spirits. He'd plop down next to me on the couch, his head resting on my lap, and just stare at me with those big puppy eyes. Sometimes, I'd talk to him like he was my therapist. "Max, you won't believe the kind of day I had." And he'd just listen, wagging his tail like he understood every word. It's funny how much comfort a dog can bring, and I realized why there seemed to be more dogs than kids here. People found joy in them, and honestly, so did I. Then came one of the biggest learning curves of my life, dating. After Amanda, I didn't think I'd dive into the dating world so soon, but life had other plans. I decided to try out this thing called online dating. Everyone was talking about apps like Tinder and Bumble, so I thought, why not? I created a profile, uploaded a decent picture, and within a few hours, I got my first match. Her name was Sarah, and she was cute, blonde, blue eyes, with a great smile. We messaged back and forth for a while, and she seemed cool. So, we decided to meet up for coffee. The day of the date, I was nervous. I'd heard horror stories about online dates going wrong, but Sarah seemed normal enough. We met at a cute little coffee shop, and I ordered my usual black coffee, no sugar. Sarah, on the other hand, ordered some complicated drink with extra foam, caramel drizzle, and a shot of who knows what. The conversation started off fine, but halfway through, I realized we didn't have much in common. She was talking about some reality TV show I'd never heard of, and I tried to follow along, but it was like she was speaking a different language. Then came the awkward silence. You know the kind. The one where both of you are searching for something to say, but come up empty. I tried to break the tension with a joke, but it fell flat. By the end of the date, we both knew it wasn't going anywhere. We said our goodbyes, and I walked home, laughing at how uncomfortable it had been. That was the first and last time I saw Sarah. Dating in the U.S. was a roller coaster, full of awkward moments, but also some sweet ones. I went on a few more dates, some better than others. But what I learned was that relationships here were different from back home. In India, relationships often involved families from the start. But here, it was more casual, more about finding a connection without the pressure of commitment right away. It was a different approach, and it took some getting used to. But amidst all the dating disasters and awkward moments, I was growing. My English was improving. I was becoming more confident in myself, and I was starting to really appreciate the small things about living in the U.S. I loved how people here could find joy in the simplest things, like spending a sunny afternoon at the park or grabbing ice cream on a hot day. It was a slower pace of life in some ways, and it taught me to slow down too. I started to make peace with the things I couldn't change. I'd still think about Amanda sometimes. wondering what she was up to, but I didn't feel that sharp pain of missing her anymore. Instead, I'd think back on our time together with a smile, grateful for the good memories. One day, as I was walking Max through the neighborhood, I bumped into an old man named George. He was probably in his 70s with a wrinkled face and a kind smile. He waved at me and said, "You're the guy with the funny accent, right?" I couldn't help but laugh. I guess my accent hadn't faded as much as I thought. We started chatting, and George told me stories about how he'd traveled the world when he was younger. He'd been to places I could only dream of: Europe, South America, even India. We talked for a while, and before I knew it, Max and I had a new walking buddy. Every evening after that, George would join us on our walks, sharing his life stories. It was a reminder that no matter where you are, you can always find connections, sometimes in the most unexpected places. As the months passed, I found myself more settled into my new life in the USA. The days flowed into weeks, and I grew fond of the little quirks that made living here special. I had mastered my daily routine, waking up early to take Max for a run before heading to work. The mornings were crisp, and I loved how the rising sun painted the sky in shades of pink and orange. It felt like the world was waking up with me, and I would take a moment to breathe it all in. At work, my confidence continued to grow. I started participating more in meetings, sharing my ideas, and even cracking a few jokes, though sometimes they landed better than others. My colleagues had grown accustomed to my sense of humor, and I often caught them chuckling at my accents and occasional mispronunciations. "Samir, you need to start a podcast," one of my coworkers joked during lunch one day. I laughed, but secretly thought, maybe one day. My friendship with Josh deepened too. He had become like family to me. One weekend, we decided to take a road trip to the Grand Canyon. It was a spontaneous decision, and we both needed an escape from the city. We loaded up the car with snacks, music, and Max, and off we went. The drive was filled with laughter and playlists that ranged from classic rock to Bollywood hits. I made Josh listen to my favorite songs, and he pretended to enjoy them, making funny faces when I sang along. When we finally arrived at the Grand Canyon, I was awestruck. The sheer size and beauty of it took my breath away. It felt like a scene from a movie, with the sun casting golden hues over the red rocks. We hiked along the trails, snapping pictures and marveling at the views. In that moment, I felt grateful for my journey, the struggles, the laughter, the friendships, and even the heartbreaks. They had all led me to this beautiful place. As we stood at the edge of the canyon, I took a deep breath, feeling the wind on my face. "You know, Samir," Josh said, "we're lucky to experience moments like this. It's what life is all about." I nodded in agreement. I thought about everything I had learned in the past year, about resilience, connection, and the importance of embracing each moment. Returning to the city, I carried that sense of gratitude with me. I had learned to appreciate the little things, like sharing a meal with friends or watching the sunset from my apartment balcony. My English was improving, and I began thinking about how I could help others who were on the same journey I had been on. One night, as I sat on my couch with Max curled up next to me, an idea struck me. What if I started a YouTube channel to share my experiences and help others learn English? I had seen so many channels dedicated to teaching English, but I wanted to add my unique perspective. The funny moments, the struggles, the lessons learned along the way. The next day, I created my channel and started filming my first video. I talked about my journey to the USA, the cultural differences I encountered, and even shared some of the funny moments I'd experienced along the way. I poured my heart into the video, hoping to inspire others who felt lost or overwhelmed, just like I had felt when I first arrived. To my surprise, the video resonated with many people. Comments began pouring in, with viewers sharing their own stories and thanking me for my honesty. I felt a sense of purpose. This was what I was meant to do. With each new video, I gained more followers and felt a growing community around me. I was no longer just a boy who moved to the USA. I was a storyteller, a friend to those navigating their own paths. Eventually, my channel took off. I found joy in creating content that was not just educational, but also entertaining. I incorporated humor, sharing embarrassing stories, and the things I still struggle with, like navigating social situations or ordering food. I brought my viewers along on my adventures, whether it was trying a new food or exploring a new city. Through it all, I never forgot the importance of connection. I continued my friendship with George, and our walks became a regular part of my week. He shared stories of his travels, and I shared my experiences with learning English. Our friendship blossomed, and he became a mentor to me in many ways. He taught me about life and its adventures, the value of sharing stories, and how every experience, good or bad, shaped who we are. As the seasons changed, so did my life. I learned to embrace change, to forgive, and to let go of the past. I still thought about Amanda occasionally, but instead of sadness, I felt a sense of closure. I was grateful for the love we shared and the lessons it taught me about relationships and myself. One evening, as I sat in my favorite cafe with a warm cup of coffee, I reflected on my journey. I realized that life in the USA had transformed me. I had learned to be more open, more resilient, and most importantly, to cherish the connections I made along the way. I felt proud of how far I'd come, from the boy who arrived with uncertainty to the young man who found his voice and purpose. In that moment, I made a promise to myself. I would continue to share my journey, inspire others, and never stop learning. I understood that life would always be a series of ups and downs, but each experience